on Daf Nun Tet by the Mishnah. So says the Mishnah, Kohen Gadol lo yisa almana. A Kohen Gadol cannot marry an almana. Ben almana min ha'irusin, ben almana min ha'nisuin. Whether it's an almana that she just got kiddushin and the man passed away, or whether she had a full nisuin and her husband passed away. Either way, she cannot marry Kohen Gadol. V'lo yisata bogeret, and he's not allowed to marry a bogeret. Bogeret is, we're going to see in a moment in the Gemara why not. A bogeret is somebody who passed the stage of na'ara, and her bitulim become a little bit less. They become a little bit. It's not completely closed the way it was beforehand. So he cannot marry bogeret. That's according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, machshirin bebogeret. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say no, a Kohen Gadol is allowed to marry bogeret. Velo yisat mukat etz, and he cannot marry somebody who her bitulim went away not because of a bia, but because of literally a piece of wood. She fell down and a piece of wood broke her bitulim, or some other way her bitulim broke besides bia. So if that was the case, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say no, that she cannot marry Kohen Gadol because she's not betula anymore. She doesn't have betulim. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. Gemara brings a braita. Almana lo yikach ben almana min ha'irusin ben almana min ha'nisuin. Any type of almana, whether it's an almana who just had kiddushin and her husband was niftar, or whether it's an almana who had nisuin and her husband was niftar, either way, she's off limits for Kohen Gadol. Pshita. The Gemara says, okay, it was pashut. Ma'odete ma'lelif almana almana mitamar. The Gemara says, I would have thought we would have learned from Tamar. By Tamar, the pasuk says, Shevi almana beit avich. So it calls Tamar an almana. Now, ma lehalan mina nisuin. Just like by Tamar, when it says almana, she didn't just have kiddushin. She was an almana from nisuin. So afkan mina nisuin. So also over here, when it says almana, cannot marry Kohen Gadol, it means from nisuin. So kamash malan, therefore the Mishnah comes to teach us that that's not the case. Any type of almana, even someone who just had kiddushin and became an almana, is still not allowed to marry a Kohen Gadol. So the Gemara says, Ve'ema achanami. Why don't we say, actually, let's learn from Tamar, and maybe the only almana should be an almana who had nisuin, not just kiddushin. Maybe that type of almana should be the only almana that's asur to Kohen Gadol. But an almana who just got kiddushin should be muteret. So the Gemara says no. Why not? Dumya de grusha, because almana is similar to grusha. They come together. So ma grusha ben mina nisuin ben mina ha'irusin. Just like a grusha, we have no reason to assume it's any woman who got a get, even if it was just after kiddushin. We have no reason to assume that it's only an almana mina nisuin. So only a grusha mina nisuin. So af almana ben mina ha'irusin ben mina nisuin. So also almana, just like grusha, is whether it's from erusin, whether it's from nisuin. Lo yisat bogeret. So we said in the Mishnah also, the Tanakama, which we're going to find out is going to be Rabbi Meir, he said that a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a bogeret. And Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, they allowed a Kohen Gadol to marry a bogeret. So Tanu Rabbanan, Vu isha b'ftulei yikach. That's the pasuk. Pasuk in the Torah says about a Kohen Gadol, Hu isha b'vtuleha yikach prad lebogeret shekalu la b'tuleha. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says this is coming to exclude a bogeret. He cannot take a bogeret because her bitulim, they diminished a little bit. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon machshirin b'bogeret. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, they allow Kohen Gadol to marry a bogeret. So this braita is repeating the halacha of our Mishnah. And it just tells us that Rabbi Meir is the Tanakama, is the first opinion that says Kohen Gadol cannot marry a bogeret. Now the Gemara explains their machlokim. What exactly are they arguing about? So Rabbi Meir Savar, the pasuk again said that Hu isha bivtuleha yikach. It's a very interesting way, bivtuleha. It could have just said isha bitula yikach. So Rabbi Meir Savar bitula. If it would have just said bitula, afilu miktzat bitulim, I would have thought even if she was just a partial bitula, that as long as there's some of the bitulim there, Mashma. Bituleha, it says bituleha adika kola bitulim. That means that the bitulim has to be fully complete, and once she is no longer a nara and they diminish a little bit, then that's it. She cannot be with a kohen gadol. That's how Rabbi Meir learns. And then bivtuleha, the extra bet of bivtuleha, he teaches me b'kedarka in shelo kedarka lo. It's only in the area of the bitulim which is kedarka, but shelo kedarka, if she is not a bitula because she had bia shelo kedarka, no, that doesn't make her pisula to marry a kohen gadol. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. So Rabbi Meir holds if she's a bogeret, no good, but if she's had bia shelo kedarka, she's still okay for a kohen gadol. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Savri. Now Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon that argue with Rabbi Meir, they hold bitula shlema. If the Torah would have just said bitula, I would have thought that's a complete bitula. Mashma. Bituleha va'afilu miktzat bitulim. From the fact that it says bituleha, that teaches me that's the opposite of the way Rabbi Meir learns. That teaches me afilu miktzat bitulim. Even if the bitulim are just partially there, that's enough for her to be okay to going on. Partial, exactly. And then bivtuleha, the extra bet, they also have a machloket. Achu kol bituleha kayamin. She has to be complete bitula ben bekedarka ben shelo kedarka, whether it's kedarka and shelo kedarka. So Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon have two machlokets. Right, one machloket is from the front. Does she have to be a complete bitula? Mm-hmm. Rabbi Meir says yes, and therefore a bogeret is off limits for a kohen gadol. And Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, they say, no, it doesn't have to be complete, as long as the bitulim are there. Even if they diminished a little bit and she became a bogeret, that's fine. That's one machloket. Second machloket is shelo kedarka. Rabbi Meir learns only in the makom of the bitulim is a problem. Mm-hmm. So if she had bia shelo kedarka, she's still a bitula for a kohen gadol, and that's okay. That's what Rabbi Meir says. And Rabbi Elazar and Shimon are machmir. They say no. That we learn from the word bivtuleha in any way that she became not a bitula. Even shelo kedarka, that makes her no longer a bitula and she's pisula for a kohen gadol. Shelo kedarka is not bitula over there. Right, but they learn from the fact that there's an extra bet in the word bivtuleha. They learn, Rashi really explains more why they darshan this way, but they learn from the word bivtuleha that even in any area that could make her not a betula, ben shedarka, ben shelo kedarka, both of them would make her pasula to a kohen gadol. So, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. So says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, Nivala shelo kedarka psula lekeuna. If she had bia shelo kedarka, she can no longer be with a kohen. This sounds like Rabbi Meir, right? Because we just said that Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon would say that shelo kedarka is not a problem. Mativ Rava asks, Velo tiye leisha. So there's a pasuk that says if someone is ones or mefateh, if somebody is ma'anes a woman, the halacha is that he has to take her as an isha. He has to be responsible for her. So that's beisha hareuyalo. That's only if she's able to be his wife. But prat la'almana lekohen gadol grusha v'chalotza lekohen hediot, coming to exclude an almana to a kohen gadol or grusha v'chalotza lekohen hediot, that if this person had a bia with an almana, right? He was ma'anes an almana, he doesn't take her as a wife. If he was a kohen gadol who's ma'anes an almana, he doesn't take her as a wife. Now, what exactly is the case of a kohen gadol being ma'anes an almana? If he did a kedarka, my area mishum almana, tepukle mishum dehavi ala beula. Forget about her being an almana. She's not a betula anymore. Anyways, she cannot marry the kohen gadol, right? If it was bekedarka, if he had bia, he was ma'anes her bekedarka the normal way, so he made her that she's no longer a betula, and he can't marry her anyways. Forget about her being an almana. Ela lav shelo kedarka. Must be that the case is that she's still a betula, and the bia was shelo kedarka, but the problem is that she was an almana, right? So he was ma'anes. When we say the kohen gadol is ma'anes a lady who's an almana, he can't be with her. It must be that that he was ma'anes or shelo kedarka. Because if it was kedarka, then he can't be with her because she's not a betula. So, umishum almana, and the reason that he's not allowed is because almana. So you see that it sounds like from here that shelo kedarka does not make her she's still considered a betula. It doesn't make her no longer a betula. So the Gemara says, right, umishum almana in mishum beula lo. The issue would be that he's being with an almana, not being with a beula. So it says Gemara top of the next page. Hamani Rebbe Meir this is going according to Rebbe Meir, meaning that braita that we just quoted about a kohen a kohen gadol who's ma'anes and almana, that's going according to Rebbe Meir, that he holds shelo kedarka.
Ma'anes, that means raping.
Yeah, he right. So Rebbe Meir, you say that's going according to Rebbe Meir, that he holds shelo kedarka is it's still acceptable for a kohen gadol. She doesn't make her a beula. She's still a betula. V'Rav da'amar ke'Rabbi Elazar, and Rav, he was saying that would be the opinion according to Rabbi Elazar. Meaning, when Rav said his halacha, right again, Rav said that Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav, that if she had a biyah shelo kedarka, she's pisula tekiuna. Rav was saying that's the halacha according to Rabbi Elazar. Rav was not talking in the world of Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara says, Iki Rabbi Elazar, my Yiriya mishum beula, tepukle dehavya la zona. The Gemara says, 1 second. If Rav said his halacha that someone who had biyah shelo kedarka cannot marry a kohen gadol, if Rav said that's the halacha, and he's saying that that's it according to Rabbi Elazar, so if you're going in the world of Rabbi Elazar, forget about beula. She becomes a zona, because any lady who had biyah, right? The Gemara is going to explain. Da Rabbi Elazar, anytime there's any biyah, not for the purpose of marriage or anything like that, it's for the purpose of znut, Rabbi Elazar holds that makes her a zona, and she can't even marry regular kohen. That's Rabbi Elazar's opinion. So if that's the case, why are we saying that, a lady who had biyah shelo kedarka, she becomes no longer a betula and she can't marry kohen gadol? If we're saying like Rabbi Elazar, if she had a biyah shelo kedarka and you're saying that's considered like biyah, so then she shouldn't even be allowed to marry regular kohen. Not because she's not a betula, because she's a zona, because she had a biyah for the purpose of zenut. So Amar Rav Yosef, kegon sheniv'ala lebehema. Rav Yosef says, no. You know what we're talking about? She had biyah shelo kedarka through a behema. Behema had biyah with her shelo kedarka. Tehata mishum beula ika, mishum zona leka. Over there, we want to say some type of svara. Rav Yosef is trying to say that over there, it makes her no longer a bitula, but it's not considered biyah, that it's considered znut. So Amar le Abaye said no, that doesn't make sense. If it's biyah, either way you cut it, you can't pick and choose, each side. If you say that the behema being with her shelo kedarka, that's considered a biyah, so in zona nami havya, that makes her a zona also, right? V'i zona lo havya, and if you say that it doesn't make her a zona, so beula nami lo havya, then it shouldn't make her a beula either. She should remain a betula. Meaning, if biyah with a behema is asura, that it says in the Torah, it's skila. But the question is that considered biyah or not? If Rabbi is saying if it's considered biyah, then it makes her no longer a betula, and it makes her a zona. Even shelo kedarka, right? If we're saying that shelo kedarka is considered biyah. And if it's not a biyah, then it's not. It doesn't make her a zona. It doesn't make her a beula. But it's still gonna be an isur to do it. But it won't make her pisula to a kohen gadol.
Is the lady goes with the behema?
Yeah, the lady is with the behema. The behema is with the lady shelo kedarka. That's what we're talking about. Does that make her pisula to a kohen gadol or not? So we wanted to say. So Abaye is saying, if you can't say that it makes her a be'ula but not a zona. Those two things go hand in hand. If it's a bia that makes a lady a zona, then it makes her a be'ula also. If it's a bia if it's not a bia and it doesn't make her a be'ula, then it doesn't make her a zona either. So we're still stuck. We want to find what's the case where there's a bia shelo kedarka that would make her pesula, that would make her a be'ula, that she cannot be with a kohen gadol, but it doesn't make her a zona. What type of bia is that? So the Gemara says, "V'chitema midi dehavia mukat etz." The Gemara says, "Okay, maybe you'll tell me that a behema, it's like a stick. It's like a, like the same way that like if a stick were to go mukat etz, if a stick goes in the bitulim, they hold that it's not okay. So maybe this is like a mukat etz shelo kedarka. It's like a stick went and made her have something go in there shelo kedarka, and that would make her pasul to a kohen gadol." Meaning maybe just like if from the front, if a stick goes inside and it breaks her betulim. Right.
It's the same situation.
So, yes, so what we're saying is maybe it's not considered bia, it's like a stick. But just like kedarka, if a stick were to go inside and break the betulim, they hold that she cannot be with a kohen gadol. Also, from shelo kedarka, the same thing, that if a stick goes inside, if something goes inside, it breaks the betulim and that's it. Whatever, there's no betulim from there, but it makes it that she's a beula. Maybe that's why if she has bia with a behema shelo kedarka, that's like same thing as like if a stick went shelo kedarka. So the Gemara says no, that can't be. It can't be that a stick shelo kedarka would make her pesula. Imkain ein lecha isha shekshira lekehuna shel naasit mukat etz al yedei tzaror. If that's the case, if anything that goes inside, even shelo kedarka, would make her not allowed to marry kohen gadol, so then there's no lady that's ever going to be ra'ui to kohen gadol. Why? Because they all had something go inside from shelo kedarka when they cleaned themselves after the bathroom. They used to use stone, so when they use stone to clean themselves in the bathroom, it goes inside shelo kedarka, and that's the same thing. If you're telling me animal is like a stick, so then anybody who had anything go there becomes pasul kohen gadol. That can't be the case. So what's the case where she's having some type of bia shelo kedarka, but it doesn't make her a zona, but it makes her no longer a betula? Has to be a real bia, can't just be a stick. So Ella Amar Rabbi Zera b'mima'enet. Rabbi Zera says the case is a lady who did miyun, meaning she was married, she was a ketana who was married, and the bia that she had was not zunut. She had a bia shelo kedarka. It wasn't zunut because she was fully married, but she did miyun. Right? It was a case where her father wasn't alive, and her mother and brother accepted kiddushin for her, so she's allowed to do miyun. She could just walk out, no get. She's not a grusha, she's not an almana, and she's in that case, but she's not considered a bitula because she had bia even shelo kedarka. That's the case that Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon are. That's the case that Rav is talking about. Okay. Amar Rav Simi Barchia. Nivala lebehema kshira lekehuna. Rav Simi Barchia says that if she had bia with a behema, she's keshera to kehuna. Right. So before we had Rav, Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav, the shelo kedarka made her pasul. Now we mentioned behema. We got into behema. We have a statement from Rav Simi Barchia. He says if she had bia with a behema, shelo kedarka we're talking about. Because she can marry kohen gadol. If she had bia with a behema, she can marry kohen gadol. Tanya nami hachi. We have a braita also that teaches this. Nivala l'misha eno ish. If she had bia with somebody who was not an ish, afal shi pisha beskila kshira lekehuna. Even though it's an isur skila, but she's still kshira lekehuna. It doesn't affect her status as far as being kasher lekehuna. Now, what's misha eno ish? Somebody who's not a man. So it's a behema. The truth is, those words are very important. Misha eno ish. There's a tshuva from the Maram Lublin and the Chida. And
someone doesn't have a husband.
No, someone who is not a lady had bia from someone who is not an ish, which means a behema. Someone who's a behema. A behema had bia with a lady. It doesn't affect her status as being pasul kehun, as being kasher to a kohen gadol.
When you said ish, that means she could have it with isha?
No. Lemish niv'ala, she had bia, lemish eino ish, from somebody who was not a man, meaning a behema.
Meaning of another lady.
A lady, a behema had bia with a lady. The lady
When
niv'ala.
you said ish, that means isha could be.
She can't. How can she have bia with an isha?
So
That's not a bia.
So still,
It's not a bia. No. We're talking about shelo kedarka, right? If she was niv'elet, she had a bia to somebody who's not an ish, she's allowed to marry she's still allowed to marry the kohen gadol. Okay, just those words though are very important. It's the Gemara is talking about it in context of a behema, but in terms of halacha, there's a lot of tshuvas. Shuvim Ram Lublin from the Chida, the Taz, the Beit Shmuel, Pitchei Tshuva, they all bring this down. Very, very interesting case. If a lady, she was an Eshet Ish, that was together with Ruach, meaning with Shin Daled. She was together with a Shin Daled. Does that make her pasul to her husband or not? She went on her own together with a Shin Daled. Does it make her pasul to her husband or not? So the Maram Lublin, one of the proofs he brings that it doesn't make her pasul is this: Nivala lemisha eno ish. It says clearly that eno ish. He says that includes anything that's not an ish. It's not considered a bia. Okay, either way, it's a long sugya, but
doesn't have body.
no, they could come in the form of a person. They came in the form of Shlomo HaMelech, and it was together with all of Shlomo HaMelech's wives. I think that's where it's actually, we're going to have it later on. Oh, no, it's in Gittin. So the Achronim over there get into it also. And they quote this Maram Lublin, that his wives are still mutarot to him. There's a machloket. Okay, either way. Kiata Ravdimi Amar, when Ravdimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he said the following story. He said, Maaseh beriva achat behitlo. There's a story of one lady in a town called Hitlo. Shaita mechabedet habayit, she was cleaning her house. Veriva kelev kofri ma'achareha, and this, certain type of dog was together with her, shelo kedarka. Dog came and attacked her and was shelo kedarka. V'yechshira Rebbe lekeuna, and Rebbe said that she's allowed to marry Kohen. Amar Shmuel ul Kohen Gadol. And Shmuel said even for a Kohen Gadol, she would be allowed. So the Gemara says, 1 second, Bimei Rebbe Kohen Gadol mihava. There was no Kohen Gadol in the times of Rebbe. Rebbe was after the time of Churban Bayit Sheni. So there was no Beit HaMikdash, there was no Kohen Gadol. So Ella Ru'uya le Kohen Gadol. Rather, what they meant is, she would, even though this happened to her, that the dog came and attacked her and was together with her, Shelo Kedarka, still she doesn't affect her status of, if there was a Kohen Gadol, she would still be Kshirat to Kohen Gadol. Amar le Rava Mefarkin le Ravashi. Rava said to Ravashi, Rava from that town said to Ravashi, Mina hamilta damu Rabbanan ein zinud lebehema. What's the mekor of that which Chachamim teach, ein znut lebehema? There's no znut for a behema. That if a behema is together with a lady, shelo kedarka, that's not considered biyad znut. How do we know that? Dichtiv, the pasuk says, Lo tavi etnan zonan umchir kelev Beit Hashem, the pasuk says. The Torah says that if there's two things, etnan zona and mechir kelev, that you cannot bring as a korban. What's etnan zona? So if I use an animal to pay a zona for her services, so that animal, once it was traded for bia with a zona, that animal cannot be brought on the mizbeach. Such an animal that was etnan zona, the Torah says, is a pasuk in the Torah. Lo tavi etnan zona umchir kelev beit Hashem. So it's telling us about two animals that cannot be brought as korbanot. One is etnan zona, an animal that is given to a zona for her services, for her in exchange for bia. Okay, so someone is together with a bia. Instead of she says I
instead of
charge.
money, they give her this.
Yeah, just together with a zona. She says I charge one sheep, so you give her a sheep. That's etnan zona. Okay, an animal that's exchanged for bia with a zona. Mechir kelev is an animal that's traded for a kelev. Right, I want to buy your kelev. I give you a sheep to trade for your kelev. That sheep is no longer allowed to be brought on the mizbeach. Okay, this is a pasuk in the Torah, straight pasuk in the Torah. So how do we know ein znut lebehema? Because the Torah says lo tavi etnan zona umchir kelev. Etnan kelev umchir zona. So etnan kelev, if he's exchanging for bia with a kelev, which Rashi says the case is that he says to a zona, I'm going to give you this sheep and you have bia with the kelev. Or umchir zona, or he's just buying a zona as a shifcha, or selling a zona for a sheep, for an animal. Right? He just goes to the market, somebody's selling a shifcha, a zona. He says, listen, I'm going to buy her from you, but he's not paying the animal for the service of bia. He's paying the animal to buy the zona, to trade for the zona, not for the znut, but for the zona herself. So mutarin, that animal is mutar, right? It's only etnan zona, trading for bia with a zona, and mechir kelev. But etnan kelev, trading for bia with a kelev, and mechir zona, just trading the animal for a zona herself, those are mutarin. Right? How do we know that? Mishum shneimar gam shnehem, because the Torah says gam shnehem. Shnehem, only those two. Etnan zona umchir kelev, but not etnan kelev umchir zona. Right? Shnayim velo arba'a. Only two cases are going to be asur, not four. Right? Only case where the animal exchanged for bia with a zona, or the animal exchanged for a kelev, but not animal that's exchanged for a zona herself, or an animal that's exchanged for bia with a kelev. Okay. So that's how you know that bia with a kelev. Yeah, we're gonna stop here. That's how you know that bia, that znut of a behema is not considered znut, because etnan zona, that exchanging for the animal to have bia with the zona, that's not considered. That's not going to be etnan zona.